The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was silent. Representatives from 47 species sat in their assigned seats, their eyes fixed on the human woman standing alone at the center platform. Ambassador Yoon Murray looked small against the massive chamber, but her voice carried to every corner without shaking. 12 million, she said. 12 million human beings. Men, women, children. 3 colonies. Gone in a single day. She pressed a button on her wrist device. Holographic images appeared above her head. Cities burning. Ships falling from the sky. Bodies in the streets. A child's hand reaching out from under rubble. The council members shifted in their seats. Some looked away. Others watched with expressions that Murray could not read. The Drak-3 attacked without warning, she continued. We had no military presence on those worlds. They were farming colonies, research stations, families trying to build new lives. High Counselor Velthius, a tall being with silver skin and 4 arms, raised one hand. Ambassador Yoon, the Council offers its deepest sympathies to humanity. This tragedy is, we do not want sympathy, Murray interrupted. Her voice remained calm, but something in her eyes made the High Counselor stop speaking. We want justice. Want the Council to sanction the Drak-3 hegemony. We want reparations for the families of the dead. We want the commanders responsible brought before a galactic tribunal. Silence again. The council members looked at each other. Some whispered to their aides. Others simply stared at the floor. Counselor Vreth, an elderly Kelvani with deep blue skin and tired eyes, watched the human ambassador carefully. He had studied humanity for 200 years. He had written reports about them. He had warned the council about them. No one had listened. High Counselor Velthius spoke again, his voice careful and measured. Ambassador, the council understands your pain. However, the Drak-3 hegemony controls 17 star systems. They serve as a buffer against threats from the Outer Rim. Sanctioning them would destabilize the entire region. Their usefulness excuses murder, Murray said. It was not a question. We must consider the greater peace, another counselor added. Surely humanity of all species understands this. You have always chosen diplomacy. You have always chosen patience. Murray stood very still. On the observation deck above the chamber, Admiral Park Do-yan watched the proceedings through a window. He was 58 years old. He had served in the human fleet for 35 years. He had never fired a weapon at another living being. None of his ships had ever seen real combat. They called humans the peaceful ones. They said it like a compliment. Sometimes they said it like an insult. Park Do-yan had heard both versions many times. He had always smiled and nodded and said nothing. Patience was a virtue. Peace was a choice. Humanity had made that choice 3 centuries ago when they joined the galactic community. But as he watched the council refuse to help, as he watched them make excuses for the deaths of 12 million of his people, something cold moved through his chest. It was a feeling he had never experienced before. It took him a moment to recognize it. It was the absence of patience. Below, Ambassador Yoon Murray listened as counselor after counselor explained why they could not help. The Drak-3 were too strong. The political situation was too complex. Perhaps in time a diplomatic solution could be found. Perhaps humanity could offer trade concessions to ease tensions. Trade concessions. For 12 million dead, Murray thought of her niece, Sua, who had lived on Colony 7. She had been 11 years old. She had wanted to be a doctor. She had. Sent Murray a video message 2 days before the attack, showing off a plant she had grown in her school's garden. Now there was no school, no garden, no SUA. Ambassador, High Counselor Velthius said, I understand this is difficult to accept, but the Council's decision is final. We cannot risk war with the Drak-3 over this incident. Incident? Murray repeated. The word tasted like ash in her mouth. We encourage humanity to seek peaceful resolution through direct negotiation with the hegemony. The Council will provide diplomatic support where possible. Murray looked around the chamber. 47 species. Some had been spacefaring for 1 million years.
Ow.
Some had technology that humans could barely understand.
Ow.
All of them sat in their comfortable seats and told her that her people's deaths did not matter enough. She took a deep breath. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet. Then we will handle this ourselves. The words hung in the air. Several counselors frowned. Others looked confused. Counselor Veth leaned forward in his seat, his old heart beating faster. Ambassador, Velthia said carefully. What do you mean by that statement? Marae did not answer. She simply turned and walked out of the chamber. The doors closed behind her with a soft sound that somehow echoed through the entire hall. Admiral. Park Do-yen met her in the corridor, and they looked at each other for a long moment without speaking. Then Park nodded once. I'll give the order, he said. Make it quiet, Marae replied. We don't want them to know until it's too late. She walked away. Park Do-yen stood alone in the corridor for a moment, looking out at the stars through a nearby window. Somewhere out there, the Drak-3 were celebrating their victory. They were laughing at the peaceful ones who could do nothing but beg for help from a council that didn't care. They thought they understood humans. They were wrong. Park pulled out his communication device and connected to his flagship, the HSS Everpeace. His second-in-command answered immediately, Admiral. How did the council session go? Set course for Earth, Park said. Shh, and send a priority message to the Defense Ministry. Tell them to prepare Protocol Zero. There was a pause on the other end. Protocol Zero was something every officer knew about but never discussed. It was a contingency plan from the earliest days of human spaceflight. It had never been used. Sir, his second-in-command said slowly, Are you certain? Park Do-yen looked at the stars one more time. He thought of the burning colonies, thought of 12 million voices silenced forever. He thought of what humanity had promised themselves they would never become again. I am certain, he said. The age of patience is over. He ended the transmission and walked toward the docking bay where his shuttle waited. Behind him, in the council chamber, Councillor Vreth was already accessing his private archives. His hands trembled as he pulled up a file that had been sealed for 300 years. The file was labeled, Humanity's Psychological Assessment, Classified. He opened it and read the final line of the assessment, written by a Kelvani researcher who had studied Earth's history. This species has not rejected violence. They have merely chosen to delay it. If that choice is ever reversed, we recommend immediate evacuation of all systems within their reach. Vreth closed the file, closed his eyes, and he began to pray. The elevator descended into the moon. General Baek-Sujin watched the numbers change on the display, counting the levels as they passed. 10, 20, 50. The elevator kept going. She had been commander of Earth's Defense Ministry for 8 years. It was a job that mostly involved paperwork and ceremonies. Humanity had no real military. They had peacekeeping ships, diplomatic escorts, patrol vessels that had never fired their weapons. That was about to change. The elevator stopped at level 93. The doors opened to reveal a long corridor carved from lunar rock. At the end of the corridor stood a single metal door with no handle. A man waited beside it. Dr. Quan Tai-Wu looked like he hadn't slept in years. His hair was gray and messy. His eyes were red. He wore a simple uniform that had seen better days. He had been the chief archivist of this place for 11 years, and he had not spoken to another human being for most of that time. General Beek, he said. His voice was rough from lack of use. I hoped I would never meet you. I understand, Sujin replied. I hoped I would never have to come here. Tai-Wu turned to the door and placed his hand on a scanner. Then he leaned forward for a retinal scan. Finally, he spoke a code phrase that had been passed down through generations of archivists. Remember what we were, he said. The door opened. The room beyond was massive. It stretched into darkness, filled with row after row of storage containers, sealed cabinets, and locked vaults. Computer terminals lined the walls, their screens dark and waiting. Welcome to the Vault of Endings, Tai-Wu said. Everything humanity swore to forget is kept here. Sujin stepped inside. The air was cold and still. She could feel the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. Show me, she said. Tai-Wu led her through the archives. He explained what each section contained. Weapon designs from the resource wars of the 22nd century. Biological agents developed during the genetic conflicts. Psychological warfare techniques refined over 10,000 years of human history. Every terrible thing humanity had ever invented to kill itself. When we joined the Galactic Council, Tai-Wu said, our leaders made a promise. No more war. No more conquest. We would become a species of peace and cooperation. But some of them understood that the universe might not let us keep that promise. He stopped at a large vault door. So they built this place. They stored everything. They created maintenance protocols so the knowledge would never be lost. And they prayed that no one would ever need to open it. Why? Sujin asked. If we wanted peace, why keep all of this? Taiwu looked at her with something like sadness. Because we knew what we were, General. We knew that the peaceful humans walking among the stars were not the real us. We were just pretending, playing a role, hoping that if we played it long enough, we might actually become it. He opened the vault door. Inside were rows of ship designs. Vessels unlike anything in the human fleet. Angular, dark, built for one purpose only. Designed in secret, updated every decade. Never built, but ready to be manufactured at a moment's notice. Sujin studied the designs. They were beautiful in a terrible way. Efficient, deadly, perfect for killing. How long to build a fleet? She asked. 3 months, Taiwu replied. The automated factories are ready. They've been ready for 300 years. Across the vault, other doors were opening. Engineers and technicians were arriving from Earth, their faces pale as they saw what had been hidden from them. Captain Han Jisoo, a young officer who had been assigned to assist with the unsealing, stood frozen in front of a display case. Inside the case was a weapon. A simple rifle, old and worn. A label beneath it read, "Last weapon fired in the final war of unification. 2156. I thought these were all destroyed," Jisoo whispered. Taiwu appeared beside her. That's what we told everyone. That's what we wanted to believe. But we kept some, just in case. Jisoo looked at him. Why lie about it? Because hope is fragile, Taiwu said. If people knew that their peaceful civilization was built on a foundation of hidden weapons, they might lose faith in what we've become. They might think that peace was impossible for us. Is it? Jisoo asked. Is peace impossible for humans? Taiwu was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned and walked deeper into the vault. Come with me. I want to show you something. He led her to a small room at the very center of the facility. Inside was a single chair facing a large screen. Taiwu sat down and activated the display. The screen showed images of Earth, but not the Earth that Jisoo knew. This Earth was burning. Cities in ruins, oceans dark with ash, bodies everywhere. This is the resource wars, Taiwu said. 3 billion dead in 4 years. We fought over water, food, land. We used weapons that poisoned the soil for generations. We nearly destroyed ourselves completely. The images changed. More wars, more death. A timeline of human violence stretching back to the beginning of recorded history. We have been killing each other for as long as we have existed, Taiwu continued. We are very, very good at it. Better than any species in the galaxy, I suspect. When we finally reached the stars and met other civilizations, we were horrified by what we had been. We swore to change. We buried our weapons and our memories, and we tried to become something new. He turned off the display. But you cannot change what you are by pretending it doesn't exist. You can only choose what to do with it, Jisoo understood. Humanity had not abandoned its nature. It had just put it in a box and hoped the box would never need to be opened. And now the box is open, she said. Yes, Taiwu replied. Now the galaxy will see what humans really are.
Aye.
Above them, on the lunar surface, communication towers began broadcasting a message to every human ship, station, and colony. The message was simple. All military personnel report to designated stations. Operation Remembrance is in effect. Across human space, men and women who had lived their whole lives in peace received the message. Some of them didn't understand what it meant. Others, the ones who had been trained in secret, the ones who had always known this day might come, began moving immediately. On the Galactic Council station, Counselor Vreth intercepted the transmission. He couldn't decode it, but he could see how far it had spread. Every human in the galaxy had received it. He tried to contact Ambassador Yoon. Myray, there was no response. He tried to contact the human fleet. Silence. Something was coming. Something that the galaxy had never seen before. And Vreth understood, with a certainty that made his old bones ache. that by the time anyone realized what was happening, it would already be too late in the Vault of Endings. Dr. Quan Tai Wu watched the engineers begin activating the dormant factories. Ships would start rolling off assembly lines within the week. Weapons would follow. And then the soldiers. Captain Han Jisoo stood beside him, watching the preparations. "Dr. Quan," she said quietly, "when this is over, will we be able to close the vault again?" Tai Wu didn't answer. He honestly didn't know. Some doors once opened could never be fully closed. 3 months had passed since the Council refused to help. 3 months of silence from human space. The Drak-3 had laughed at first. Then they had grown curious. Now, as Warlord Krath stood on the bridge of his flagship, they were beginning to feel something unfamiliar. They were beginning to feel fear. "What are those ships?" Krath demanded, pointing at the scanner display. His sensor officer shook his head. "Unknown design, Warlord. We have no records of any species using this configuration." Ships were black. Not painted black, but built from materials that seemed to eat light itself. They moved in perfect formation, hundreds of them appearing at the edge of Drak-3 space. They made no sound on any communication channel. They broadcast no identification signals. They just waited. Krath was a warrior who had conquered 12 worlds. He had never lost a battle. He had burned human colonies and watched them die without feeling anything but contempt. "Open a channel," he commanded. "Let me speak to their leader." Communication officer worked his console. "Channel open, Warlord." Shh. Krath straightened his armor and spoke in his most commanding voice. "Unknown vessels, you have entered Drak-3 space. Identify yourselves or be destroyed." Silence. "This is Warlord Krath of the Drak-3 hegemony. I have destroyed fleets larger than yours. I have crushed empires. If you do not respond, I will." The screen in front of him flickered. An image appeared. It showed a burning city. Human children running through the streets. Drak-3 soldiers laughing as they fired into crowds. A little girl falling, her hand reaching out toward something just beyond the camera's view. The image changed. More cities. More death. More children. Then the screen went black. And a single word appeared in Drak-3's script. "Remember?" The communication cut off. Krath stared at the blank screen, his heart's beating faster. "Warlord," his tactical officer said, his voice shaking, "they are advancing." Admiral Park Doyan stood on the bridge of his new flagship. It was not called the Everpeace anymore. They had renamed it. The new name was painted on the hull in letters 3 stories tall. The HSS Reckoning. Park looked at his crew. They were young. Most of them had never seen combat. 3 months ago, they'd been engineers, scientists, teachers. Now they wore the black uniforms of the First Retribution Fleet, and they looked at him with eyes that burned with cold fire. "All ships," Park said calmly, "begin the approach. Standard formation. Hold fire until my command." The fleet moved forward. 900 human vessels against the 1,000-ship armada that Krath had assembled to defend Drak-3 space. In the weapon control room, Lieutenant Shin Yuna sat at her console. Her hands were trembling. She had trained for this moment for 3 months, but training was not the same as reality. In a few minutes, she would be killing living beings. She looked at the small photograph taped to the edge of her screen. It showed a little girl holding a flower. The girl had been her sister's daughter. She had lived on Colony 7. Yuna's hands stopped trembling. The Drak-3 fleet opened fire first. Massive energy beams lanced across space toward the human ships. It was a show of force, meant to intimidate, to demonstrate their superior firepower. The human ships did not try to dodge. Instead, they adjusted their angles slightly, letting the beams strike their forward shields at an oblique angle. The energy scattered harmlessly into space. Krath watched in disbelief. Impossible. Those shields should not be able to deflect our weapons. "Warlord," his tactical officer said, "their shield technology is unknown. It appears to be adaptive. It's learning our weapons' signatures and adjusting in real time. Then change our frequency patterns. Overwhelm them with volume." The Drak-3 fleet unleashed everything they had. Thousands of weapons firing at once, filling space with deadly energy. And still, the human ships came forward, their shields flickering but holding. Where a Dracthury officer shouted, "They're in range of their weapons now." Krath smiled grimly. "Good. Let them fire. Our ships can withstand anything their peace-loving technology can produce." The human ships fired. The first Dracthury vessel simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there. The next, there was nothing but expanding particles where it had been. Then another ship died. And another. And another. What is happening? Krath screamed. "What are those weapons?" No one could answer him. The human weapons were unlike anything in galactic records. They didn't burn, or explode, or tear. They simply erased. Wherever they touched, matter stopped being matter. Admiral Park watched the battle unfold on his tactical display. His face showed no emotion. "Maintain fire pattern," he ordered. "Focus on their command ships first. Leave the transports for last." Admiral, his second-in-command, said quietly, "They're trying to retreat." Park nodded. "I see that. Navigator, calculate intercept courses." They don't get to leave. The human fleet split into 3 groups, moving with perfect coordination. They surrounded the Dracthury forces, cutting off every escape route. The black ships moved through space like shadows, appearing where the Dracthury least expected them, disappearing before they could respond. Krath tried everything. He changed tactics. He sacrificed ships to create openings. He attempted strategies that had never failed him. For nothing worked. The humans didn't fight like any species he had ever encountered. They didn't seek glory or honor. They didn't taunt their enemies or accept surrenders. They simply killed with a cold efficiency that made Krath's blood run cold. 4 hours later, it was over. The Dracthury fleet was destroyed. Not defeated, destroyed. Every ship that carried weapons was gone. Only the medical vessels and civilian transports remained. Those were allowed to leave. Krath's flagship was the last to fall. As the human weapons tore through his bridge as fire consumed everything around him, he finally understood what the humans were. They were not the peaceful species he had mocked. They were not weak. They had never been weak. They were predators who had chosen to stop hunting. And now they had started again. Admiral Park received the final battle report. 47 human ships lost. 892 Dracari vessels destroyed. A victory beyond anything the galaxy had seen in recorded history. His crew waited for him to speak. Some expected celebration. Others expected a speech about justice or revenge. Park said only one thing: collect the wreckage for analysis, then set course for the next system. He walked off the bridge and went to his quarters. He sat alone in the darkness for a long time. He did not feel proud. He did not feel satisfied. He felt only a terrible weight, the knowledge of what he was capable of, and what he had finally become. Across the galaxy, Counselor Vreth received the battle report. He read the numbers 3 times, certain there must be a mistake. There was no mistake. He called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. When the representatives assembled, he showed them the data from the battle. "This is impossible," one counselor said. "No species can achieve these results." "Humans can," Vreth replied quietly. "We just never believed they would." Another counselor stood up. "We must stop them. Before they destroy the Dracthury completely. Before they turn their attention to us." Vreth shook his head. "How? You saw what they did to a fleet that outnumbered them. Do you want to send our ships against them?" Silence fell over the chamber. Every representative was thinking the same thing. They had told humanity to solve its own problems. Now humanity was solving them, and there was nothing in the galaxy that could make them stop. The Dracthury homeworld was called Drac Prime. It had 17 moons and 3 suns. For 1,000 years, it had been the heart of an empire that conquered and destroyed without mercy. Now, from orbit, Ambassador Yoon Murray could see the fires burning on its surface. She stood at the observation window of the HSS Reckoning, watching the planet below. The human fleet surrounded it completely. Every military base on the surface had been destroyed. Every shipyard had been reduced to rubble. Every weapon factory had been erased. The civilians were untouched. Human soldiers had been very careful about that. They killed only those who fought. Everyone else was left alone. It made the Dracthury more afraid than if humans had simply slaughtered everyone, Ambassador, a young officer, said, approaching her carefully. High Counselor Velthius has arrived. He's requesting permission to come aboard. Ray did not turn from the window. Let him come. 10 minutes later, Velthius stood before her in the observation room. He looked older than she remembered. His silver skin had lost its shine. His forearms hung loosely at his sides. Ambassador Yoon, he said, I come on behalf of the Galactic Council. We are requesting that humanity cease military operations immediately. Murray finally turned to face him. Requesting. The Council is concerned about the scale of destruction. Concerned. Murray tasted the word. Tell me, High Counselor, were you concerned when the Drac 3 burned our colonies? Were you concerned when 12 million of my people died screaming? Velthius lowered his eyes. We made a mistake. I admit that. But this has gone too far. You have destroyed their entire military. Their empire has collapsed. What more do you want? I want justice, Murray said simply. I want the commanders who ordered the attack on our colonies brought before a tribunal. I want them to stand trial for what they did. And I want the entire galaxy to watch. That can be arranged, Velthius said quickly. The Council will support a tribunal. Just stop the fighting. Murray shook her head. It's not enough. There's one more thing we require. Name it. The Drac 3 will broadcast a confession to every species in the galaxy. They will show what they did to our people. They will explain exactly what happened and why. And then they will show what we did in response. Velthius stared at her. You want them to humiliate themselves? I want the galaxy to remember, Murray replied. I want every species to see what happens when you attack humanity. I want them to understand that we are not the gentle creatures they thought we were. We gave peace a chance. We gave diplomacy a chance. We asked for help and were refused. So we helped ourselves. She stepped closer to the High Counselor, and he instinctively stepped back. This is not revenge, she continued. This is education. The galaxy needs to learn that humanity is not prey. We never were. We just chose not to hunt. 3 days later, the broadcast went out across the galaxy. Every species with access to interstellar communication watched. They saw footage of the Drac 3 attack on human colonies. They saw the burning cities, the dead children, the ships falling from the sky. They heard the screams of 12 million people as they died. Then they saw what came after. They saw the human fleet emerging from nowhere, like ships against the stars. They saw the battle that lasted for hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Drac 3 military. They saw human soldiers walking through Drac 3 cities, their weapons ready, their faces showing no emotion. And they saw the Drac 3 commanders standing in chains, confessing to their crimes before a human tribunal. The entire galaxy watched in silence. On a small transport ship far from the front lines, Private Kong Yoonji sat in the cargo hold, writing a letter to her family. She had been a schoolteacher before the war. Now, she carried a weapon and wore armor and had killed more beings than she could count. Dear Mother and Father, she wrote, I am safe. The fighting is almost over. We have won. She paused, her pen hovering over the paper. I don't know if winning is the right word. We have destroyed our enemies. We have made them pay for what they did. But I look at myself in the mirror and I don't recognize the person looking back. She thought about the last city she had walked through. The Drac 3 civilians had hidden in their homes, terrified of the human soldiers passing by. Children had cried when they saw her. Mothers had shielded their young with their bodies. She had not hurt any of them. No human soldier had. But the fear in their eyes had been absolute. I used to tell my students that violence was never the answer, she continued. I used to believe that words could solve any problem. Now I know that some problems can only be solved with fire. She stopped writing and looked at the letter. Then she crumpled it up and threw it away. Some truths were too heavy to share. On the bridge of the reckoning, Admiral Park Do-yeon received the final report. The Drac 3 had accepted all of humanity's terms. The military commanders would face trial. The confession had been broadcast. The war was over. His second-in-command approached him carefully. Admiral, the crew is asking if there will be a celebration. Park shook his head. No celebration. We did what we had to do. There's nothing to celebrate about that. Sir, with respect, we won. We achieved the greatest military victory in galactic history. The soldiers deserve recognition." Park turned to face her. His eyes were tired, carrying a weight that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. "Do you know what we proved today?" he asked quietly. "We proved that humans are the most efficient killers the galaxy has ever seen. We proved that all our talk of peace was just a mask over something terrible. We proved that when pushed, we become monsters." He looked out at the stars. "It's not something to celebrate. That's something to mourn." Master Yun Myrei joined him at the window. They stood together in silence, watching the conquered planet below. "Was it worth it?" she asked finally. Park thought about the 12 million dead. He thought about the burning colonies. He thought about the little girl whose image had been broadcast across the galaxy, her hand reaching out from under the rubble. "I don't know," he admitted. "We got justice. We got revenge. We got safety, at least for now. But we also lost something. We lost the idea that we could be better than what we were." Myrei nodded slowly. "Maybe that idea was always a lie."
Right.
Park agreed. "Or maybe it was the only thing keeping us human." He gave orders to begin the withdrawal from Dracthori space. The war was over. The enemy was defeated. Humanity had won. But as the fleet turned toward home, every human aboard knew that they were not the same people who had left Earth. 3 months ago, they had remembered what they were, and they would never be able to forget again. 10 years had passed since the war. The galaxy had changed in ways both visible and invisible. The Galactic Council chamber looked the same as it always had, with its high ceilings and curved walls and seats for representatives of 47 species. But something was different now. Something in the air. Something in the way the other species looked at the human delegation. It was respect and fear. And something else that had no name, Councillor Vreth. Now the oldest living member of the council stood at the central platform. His blue skin had faded with age, and he needed a staff to support his weight, but his voice was still strong. "I have served this council for 230 years, he said. "I have watched empires rise and fall. I have seen wars and peace and everything in between. But I have never seen anything like what happened 10 years ago." He paused, letting his words settle over the chamber. "Before the war, we looked at humanity and saw what we wanted to see. We saw a peaceful species, gentle and cooperative. We thought they were soft. We thought they were weak. We told ourselves that they had evolved beyond violence." Shook his head slowly. "We were fools." Chancellor Yun Myrei sat in the human delegations section, listening. She was older now, with gray in her hair and lines around her eyes. But she still carried herself with the same calm authority she had shown on the day she told the council that humanity would handle things themselves. Humanity did not evolve beyond violence. Vreth continued. They mastered it. They understood it so completely that they could choose to set it aside. But it was always there, waiting. And when we refused to help them, when we told them their dead children did not matter enough, they made a different choice. He looked directly at the human delegation. "I have studied human history. I have read about their wars, their weapons, their capacity for destruction. They spent 10,000 years killing each other. They became very good at it. When they reached the stars, they looked at themselves and were horrified. They buried their weapons and their memories and tried to become something new." He turned back to face the full council. They succeeded. For 300 years, they were the most peaceful species in the galaxy. They resolved conflicts through diplomacy. They helped other civilizations grow. They were kind and patient and gentle. His voice hardened. But we mistook their kindness for weakness. We thought their patience meant they had forgotten what they were. The Dracthori thought they could murder human children without consequences. And we, the council, thought we could ignore their cries for justice. He slammed his staff against the floor, the sound echoing through the chamber. We were wrong, and millions of Dracthori died because of our mistake. Silence filled the hall. No one moved. No one spoke. Vreth nodded to Chancellor Yun. "Humanity has a proposal for the council. I suggest we listen very carefully." Myrei stood and walked to the central platform. Every eye in the chamber followed her. 10 years ago, she began, my species learned something about itself. We learned that we are capable of terrible things. We learned that the peace we built was a choice, not a nature. We learned that when pushed far enough, we become exactly what we always feared we might be. She looked around the chamber. Meeting the eyes of representatives from species she had known for decades, we do not want to be monsters. We do not want to be conquerors. We want to return to peace. We want to continue being the gentle, cooperative species we worked so hard to become. Her voice grew harder. But we will not go back to being victims. We will not stand by while innocents die and councils make excuses. Never again. She raised a data tablet and projected its contents above her head. This is a proposal for a new galactic charter. Under this charter, genocide is a crime that requires immediate response. No exceptions. No delays. No political calculations. When innocent people are massacred, the galaxy responds. Together, murmurs spread through the chamber. Some representatives looked worried. Others looked interested. If a species commits genocide, Murray continued, all members of the council will join in response. If a member refuses, they will be expelled from the council. If they try to remain neutral, they will be considered supporters of the aggressor. One representative stood up. Chancellor Yoon, this is extreme. You're asking us to commit to wars we may not want to fight. S. Murray agreed. I am, because the alternative is what happened to my people. The alternative is 12 million dead, while the galaxy watches and does nothing. She lowered the data tablet. We are not threatening you. We are not demanding you accept out of fear. We are asking you to look at what happened and learn from it. We are asking you to build a galaxy where no species has to choose between accepting genocide and becoming monsters. The vote took 3 hours, representatives argued. Some protested. Some threatened to walk out. In the end, the charter passed unanimously, not because they believed in it. Not because they suddenly cared about justice, because they remembered what happened to the Drac theory. And they did not want to be next. Far from the council chambers. On a planet that had once been Colony 7, an old man walked through a field of flowers. Park Do-yeon was 73 now. He had retired from the military immediately after the war and had never returned to space. He came to this memorial every year. On the anniversary of the attack, he walked among the graves, reading the names, remembering the faces. A young girl approached him. She was maybe 10 years old, with bright eyes and a curious expression. Her name was Na Hyun-soo, and she had been born 5 years after the war. Are you Admiral Park? She asked. He smiled sadly. I was once. Now I'm just an old man. My teacher told us about you. She said, you saved humanity. Park knelt down so he could look the girl in the eyes. Is that what she said? Hyun-soo nodded. She said you led the fleet that defeated the Dracthery. She said you're a hero. Park was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head. I'm not a hero, little one. I'm just a person who did what needed to be done. There's a difference. But you won the war, Hyun-soo said, confused. Isn't that good? Winning isn't always good, Park replied. Sometimes winning means becoming something you never wanted to be. Hyun-soo thought about this. Then she asked, are humans warriors? Park looked at the graves surrounding them. He thought about the war. He thought about the faces of the Dracthery as they died. He thought about the person he had become and the person he had been before. No, he said finally. We're not warriors. We're something more complicated. We're people who learned what we're capable of and chose every single day not to be that. We chose peace because we knew what would happen if we didn't. But you fought anyway, Hyun-soo said. Because sometimes someone takes the choice away from you. Sometimes peace isn't possible, no matter how much you want it. Put his hand on her shoulder. The important thing is that we tried. We tried for 300 years to be better than what we were. And when this is all over, when the galaxy is safe again, we'll try again. He stood up and looked at the sky. That's what makes us human, I think. Not our capacity for violence. Not our ability to destroy. Our ability to choose. To keep choosing peace, even when we know what we could do if we chose differently. Hyun-soo nodded slowly, not fully understanding, but sensing that she had learned something important. Park walked her to the edge of the memorial, where her parents were waiting. Then he returned to the field of flowers and stood alone among the graves. On Earth's moon, in the depths of Luna Station, Dr. Kwon Tai-woo sealed the vault of endings once more. The weapons were stored. The plans were filed. The terrible knowledge was locked away. He hoped, like all humans hoped, that the doors would never need to open again. But he kept the key close, because humanity had learned its lesson. They would choose peace. They would always choose peace, until someone made that choice for them, and then the galaxy would remember, once more, exactly what humans were capable of.